right, so let's talk about this new Anthony Mackie movie called Elevation. This is a movie that I went into completely blind. I knew that there was Anthony Mackie because I saw the poster, and Morena Baccarin because I also saw the poster. But I didn't know what it was about going into it, and I expected it to be a generic action movie. It was not. It was a slightly less generic thriller. And honestly, a slightly less generic thriller is way more interesting to me than a generic action movie, so I was happy with this surprise. It really elevated my expectations and experience of the film, and I made that pun because someone else made it for me, and then I'm like, I've got to steal it. But it was interesting. I enjoyed the concept of the movie. I'm not going to go into too many specifics because I think this is a movie where if you know, the less you know, the better. But it was interesting. I liked the concept. I liked most of its execution. There are some parts that I'm like a bit weary on, like, oh, of course that happened. But my real issue with the storytelling of this film is that they are clearly wanting to make sequels, and they sequel bait hard. And that gets a little frustrating because you want a standalone story sometimes with these, because it's, if you barely heard about it and there were only like 2 showtimes at your screening at your theater, it's probably not going to make the money back for a sequel unless it's like a streaming release, but this wasn't a streaming release. So it's a little infuriating. Maybe we'll get a sequel in streaming, but like not all of the questions are resolved, and that's the big issue with the film. So I'm going to give it a hand grenade score here on story because, like I said, the ideas and the executions were good enough. I think the ideas were great, excellent. The execution was good enough, but the fact that they just kept sequel baiting is really annoying, and it got sick and tiring. But I'm still giving it a hand grenade score just because it was pretty cool. And the cinematics of the movie are actually one of the strongest parts. The sound design, the visual effects, way better than I was expecting for this movie. They probably spent all the budget on visual effects and no budget on marketing. Probably makes sense. But I gotta admit, solid visual effects, solid score, solid sound design. It was interesting. It was cool. It did a good job feeling like a thriller. And that's awesome. Better than a generic action movie, like I said. But yeah, I'm giving it a hand grenade score here. Directing, I think there were some really cool shots. He did some really cool shots, but again, nothing too special. But those really cool shots are dope. I literally said under my breath when I saw one of them, and I'm like, okay, that's cool as hell. So I'll give him a hand grenade score here as well. I'm starting to think that this movie is... Yeah, the more I'm looking back on it, the more I'm thinking it's a little bit more rewatchable than I previously expected. But the story is really where it gets a little irritating. Like I said, sequel bait, annoying as hell. But continuing on, the performances I thought were all right. I enjoyed it, but they were a bit overdone. I think they were overacting just a tad, and that's like the only real issue. I think the performances could have chilled a bit because the material they had wasn't like demanding of super strong performances, and they were just like trying a little too hard at points, and you could tell. So I'm giving a hot pocket score here for the acting. Anthony Mackie is charismatic enough in the role, and Morena Baccarin is good enough in her role, but like it just felt a little off for both of them because they're just like naturally charismatic people, but their characters didn't deem that charisma, and so it felt a little off. But like I said, expectations and experience, I didn't know what I was really expecting, but it was better than I expected, and that's pretty enjoyable. You always love when something's better than you expect, especially when you had no expectations, which means you couldn't get disappointed. So if you got disappointed, it was pretty bad. But I gotta admit, I'm leaning towards this being a little bit more of a hot pocket movie than a hand grenade movie, just purely due to the fact that the sequel baiting is a little annoying, and cliffhangers are rough in all media when you don't get the conclusion to the story, and that's the big issue. You don't get a conclusion to the story, which is why it's not infinitely rewatchable. It's not like super rewatchable. It's because of that loose ending. But that's pretty much all I have to say. This is a certified hot pocket movie, and if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment down below your thoughts on the movie if you checked it out, or if you're now planning to catch it on streaming, and subscribe if you haven't already. And other than that, I will leave you guys to it.